Good afternoon, guys. This is Alex B at Bitcoin Magazine. We are here at Bitcoin Plus Plus in beautiful Austin. Obviously, it's been a great event so far. I am here with Michael from Boltz and Tiero, CTO at Vulpem Ventures. How are you guys doing so far?
I'm doing great.
Also great.
Amazing. Listen, I wanted to get you guys in a little conversation so we can touch on a couple of topics. Before we begin or dive into it, maybe you guys want to give a little intro about what it is that you guys are working on. And I mean, obviously, probably a lot of people in the space know you, but maybe some not. So give a little intro about your company and the products that excite you right now.
I think I will go. Vulpem does a bunch of things. We are a venture builder. I think the most interesting thing that we are now very excited to work on is ARC, and we were here sharing ARC with a lot of people, so yeah, exciting.
At Boltz, we do submarine swaps between the Bitcoin layers, and right now we offer swaps between Lightning, the Bitcoin main chain, and Liquid. And we're going to expand that to more chains and more different types of swaps really soon.
That is pretty interesting. I mean, obviously, Lightning is one of the big topic around here, even if we're not here specifically to discuss Lightning, but I think it's been on everyone's mind with regards to looking back at the journey of Lightning and where we've arrived and the challenges we faced. It's been a bit of a rough road, and I was wondering for Michael how exactly has it been in the last couple of years as we continue to kind of iterate exactly how we approach Lightning, and what are the new challenges that are coming up when, perhaps nice problems to have because there's more adoption, but what are the blind spots maybe that we had when conceiving or coming up with Lightning in the beginning?
Wouldn't say, we've been running Lightning on mainnet since 2019, and we always were one of the bigger nodes there are and still have one of the bigger nodes. And the biggest blind spot that was glaringly obvious recently was in a high fee environment, Lightning tends to hurt a lot. Especially everyone is afraid of force closes that could cost you hundreds if not thousands of dollars, sweeping pending HTLCs and weird bugs in implementations, also compatibility bugs between different implementations that cause that show up when fees spike, because those conditions are hard to test, and with the fee spike after the halving, nobody was expecting that, and things happened. In general, I'd say we've come a pretty long way, which was rocky at times, but right now, when the fee environment is stable and smooth, everything works beautifully. It's just that post-halving, with fees spiking from 50 to 2,000 sat per VBYTE in one block, it gets interesting to run our big Lightning node.
It's gonna get a little more volatile. So maybe this is the kind of environment we need to expect. And I guess one of the big question is how we prepare for this, right? I mean, maybe one of the things that you guys have come up in terms of solution is allowing us to maybe open channels and move some of those operations to different chains, and obviously submarine swaps. Obviously, Tiero is used to working on Liquid. I think this is something that has caught on quite a bit with regards to Boltz. Maybe you guys can expand on that and what you can envision in the future as far as that's concerned, and Lightning operating with different layers.
Roughly a year ago, when ordinals initially came up, we had a similar fee spike. And back in the day, pretty much a little over a year ago, we launched the submarine swaps to Liquid and from Liquid to Lightning, simply because we saw the high fee environment on the main chain, and nobody was touching anything because it's so prohibitively expensive. And we had the code for Liquid ready, which I wrote pretty much together with Tiero back in the day, and we pulled the trigger and said, hey, yeah, Liquid is not the most used thing right now, but for this use case it could be really nice, because it's a user experience that people are used to, UTXO models, Green Wallet, which also works on main chain, it's things people are used to, and why not give it a shot? Why not see if there is demand for a side chain with trade-offs, but you save so much on fees, it might be worthwhile for some people. We don't force anyone to use Liquid, but if you want to, we are happy to provide the service.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think for sure at some point you will always need to find some way to lower the pressure on main chain, and having some, as Michael said, having a side chain which are clear trade-off, which is evident. I think that's a common way to do that for now. And I think the interesting part is also to connect into what you were asking before about blind spot. I think we quickly realized that in general we were undervaluing how hard it is for people to run technology that work very well if you are a server. And Lightning is really, what I always saying is incredible technology if you assume that everybody, every peer is really a server. So it's really server to server technology, and I think that is a huge potential to do that. But I think the last mile it has to be something different, and Lightning will be able, this lingua franca, to connect from Fedimint to Liquid to Arc. I think there is still a huge design space for innovating, and yeah, let's see. I think especially in this conference we are seeing a lot of people looking with fresh eyes to new things, and not just focusing very in only on one thing. And Lightning will always be the way to connect all these new ideas.
And do you think that Liquid is one of these things that people are looking at with fresh eyes? Because one of the main narrative, obviously, in the last couple of months is the Bitcoin season 2 and the propagation of layers with different security trade-offs, some more trust minimized than others. But I think quickly a lot of builders are finding out that it's maybe hard to do very much better than a multi-sig federations, right? And obviously as people that have been working on multi-sig federations in the past, I think you can appreciate in a very special way some of those topics. Is there something for you guys that make you feel like Liquid has still to this day kind of made right decisions from an architecture point of view, and if it can remain relevant or competitive when it comes to some of the other proposals that are coming up on in the conversation?
Yeah, I think that it's not super easy to understand the different trade-offs. For sure, Lightning gives to the user unilateral exit, but at the same time, a Lightning node is one of the most hot wallet you can get. So you really need to have these keys on a line service most of the time, or if it's a server assisted wallet, you may have issues with a coordinator an LSP, and then you depend on that. So you are not really self-sovereign anyway. So because if your coordinator disappear, you don't really know how to backup everything, or it would be very, very hard. I think the interesting part of having an actual blockchain is that you keep the same kind of user experience. You just backup your 12 words, right? Liquid is a blockchain, so you backup your 12 words, and you can have some sort of cold storage kind of setup. Again, Liquid Bitcoin in particular is federated, so is an IOU. Nobody is saying that LBTC is censorship resistant, but maybe if you may interest in other things like other assets like Tether, in the end Tether is a centralized stablecoin. So it doesn't matter if it's on Liquid or Tron or any other chain that people are using. So I think all those use cases that potentially are not being very enough explored yet, I think there's a lot of potential there.
In the grand scheme of things, of the new proposals coming up, I think Liquid is here to stay for at least quite a while, because Bitcoin season 2, so much going on, so many new proposals floating around, but Liquid has been around the block. It's known, and it survived it survived, and it's still around today. And what goes underappreciated quickly is that things that are stable and reliable, because even if we have some rollups, some CK rollups, some optimistic rollups, some cut VM, would you I have a little bit of reservations about it in the beginning. If it's actually stable and reliable, and I can actually use it properly.
Yeah, I mean,
Liquid
people
you can use today.
Exactly. People, I think, underappreciate like you said, the resilience and robustness that's required from, you're talking about at the end of the day, like operating servers with very high sort of like persistence, right, in terms of service availability. So, Liquid, I mean, it hasn't always been like pretty with just like in anything Bitcoin, but it's still around. It has a good foundation, and we can easily, I think it's inspired quite a lot of people, but I think those that are building similar projects right now maybe underestimate the difficulty, right, of running a system like this.
One might dislike or like Liquid for what it is, but like considering for what it is, it has done a good job for its operations. Like it has its little problems here and there, like an outage for an hour or something in the last couple of years, but in the grand scheme of things, it has been super stable and reliable, and that's something that goes underappreciated quickly, I think, because, it's hard to do operations.
Yeah, no, exactly. So when it comes to having this market maybe of, different layers, chains, side chains, however you want to call them, that are available to users, obviously, one of the most obvious problem that comes up is this fragmentation within the ecosystem, and so this is where maybe services like Boltz come in that are able to provide liquidity across this network of different chains and services. How do you think about the challenges with regards to that exactly? We know that liquidity is kind of a thorny problem to have. It's almost kind of like it's not only a technical problem, it's a challenge, it's a financial problem. And so how do you think about this, maybe also from the perspective of we want to maximize competition across those service providers so that users have the best market rate, right? Is there work to open source code or standardize process, like there is efforts to standardize LSPs? How do you see this thing developing?
The very core of our code is open source and MIT licensed. Our website and our backend are just source available. Because like when you bootstrap a business, it's tricky. It's a decision you have to make. We did make that decision. I'm not super proud of it, and I would do it differently today, but that's where we are right now. In the end, an open spec would make sense, but we are so early in this process of being a bridge between the layers that we are pretty much the first ones to do this on Liquid, and that's just the first step. We don't even know yet what will be needed, so it's hard to come up with a standard. And
do you think it makes sense? Do you think it makes sense to have that maybe eventually be a part of LSP standards, right? Because ultimately, if everything is going to be connected through Lightning, maybe those swaps between chains and services can actually be offered by LSPs, and therefore, it makes everything to have all of this modular capabilities. I think this is one of the underlying theme right now in sort of like what's being built, is this ability to have pieces of technology that we can integrate into services and whatnot. Fediment is trying to do that. Noster is a service that's modular, you can integrate within your systems. So do you think it makes sense for that to be just built at the LSP level and maybe kind of like latch on to this effort to get to where you want to go?
Like in the end, we talked to the LSP spec group and about this exact thing, and in the end, the consensus was that it's not really applicable and also a little bit too early, because when we talk about being a bridge for all the different layers, we don't even know what the layers are yet. Yeah. So it's an unknown problem. Once we have some kind of clarity of these kind of chains, these kind of layers make sense, this is how swaps make sense, this is the most efficient way to do it, then we can talk about it. But right now we're talking about standardizing an unknown, which is like a thing of impossible to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's still extremely early. Do you want to share something about that?
No, I think since I'm not involved in the topic, since I'm not running Boltz, I think also it's very hard for not only open source developer that is actually building a business to be in the same room with other competitors. And it's not only about, I want to keep my secret, because in the end it's just an open API, and Boltz is public API, so they can actually copy, the API of Boltz, so everybody can do it. But my point is that every business has its own user, and every business has its own sensibility to their user, and it's very hard to sit in a room and standardize things that are people problem and not technical problem. And I think standardizing yearly for sure will make sense, but I think we need 10 Boltz, which means that our ecosystem should be 10x bigger than is now to justify, I think, this yearly effort of standardization. So for now, I really think that if Revolut tomorrow comes, or Venmo or Cash App in US come tomorrow, that makes sense to sit on a table because they have the user. Otherwise, you're just in a small village and try.
The time that you're spending trying to put that together is time that you're spending not building your product,
exactly.
right?
I was about to say that we can move so much faster if we can just try out things ourselves and see where it goes. Oh, maybe that was a mistake. Let's revert that and try something else. It's much more easy to do that, and you can just move so much faster when you are not held back by a committee of spec people who standardize. In the end, it makes sense when you have an ecosystem that depends on it. It makes a lot of sense. But the first LSPs, they weren't supposed to spec.
Yeah.
In the end, they just tried, found out what makes sense, and now we find a common denominator. And I think a similar process makes sense here too, that you start out with a couple projects, just figuring out what makes sense, what can we do, what can't we do, what is the most sensible way of doing things, and then when we have these answers, we can come together and find a common denominator of we all comply to this spec. But right now, we just find out what even makes sense to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, there's not a lot of examples of standardization process that worked out very, very well in the Bitcoin space. Lightning maybe being the only one, really. I remember a couple of years ago there was an attempt to do it for wallets in general, right? I think I don't remember exactly the name, but it sounds like that didn't go anywhere. I think Giacomo was involved in some of that, but anyways, so one of the things obviously I wanted to talk to you two about. Michael, I don't know to what extent you're involved in this, but Tiero, you've been obviously working on Arc. I don't want to say it's your flagship product for me, but there's a lot of interest, and certainly there was a lot of hype around it. And you guys with Steven have kind of shown quite a bit of interesting progress, in so far at the event. Do you want to share with us how you're seeing things play out, and exactly those progress that you've made?
Sure. I think Arc is still in I would say, post-idea stage. So it's very hard to say it can be a viable product or it can be a viable business yet. But I think it's interesting on a side that, to me, I consider Arc user-centric protocol. It tried to not have to start from a grand scheme of things, but they tried to see what was working in the ecosystem. We saw that Lightning was becoming, especially to serve mobile apps, mobile wallet and light clients. These LSPs were basically becoming the central point, and we said, okay, why we don't create a protocol from the ground up that does this concept? And I think the interesting part of Arc is really that we managed to show that it is doable, is working, and I think the next step will really be trying to understand what are the real use case that demand this huge requirement of liquidity, which is not really a problem in my opinion, but the real problem is finding Bitcoin demand, and so far I don't see that much of Bitcoin demand in if you don't consider JPEG on the chain or others, there is no really people
for
really,
payments for payments,
and I think that's the missing point yet. We are not in a hyper Bitcoinized world, so that's why I don't think there is anything to rush in the end, because we really need to increase the ramp of Bitcoin in general, so regardless, and Arc will be there when will be needed.
Yeah, generally I agree. But so right now, you guys are working on an implementation on Liquid, and we had this conversation earlier, but I didn't really this is something that just occurred to me really, but it's the idea that I think a lot of the arguments when it comes to Liquid in the conversation around scaling is, well, Liquid's just another blockchain, right? So it's not going to scale. Some have said, well, we can easily increase the block size, but that's never really a legitimate solution. But in the context of just using it as a way to onboard users into virtual UTXOs on top of Liquid, you effectively have the same trust model that you do with, I guess you have the added trust model of the ARC service provider, but that's fairly trust minimized. So I think this is an interesting way to approach this. From a financial perspective, I mean, what you mentioned, like, if we have Bitcoin demand, we need to find liquidity to service those ARC transactions. I wonder, Michael, is this something you've given some thoughts about, or?
Some thoughts for sure, but as Tiero said, it's very early for ARC, and we don't even know yet how it's going to be used, and depending on the usage, the liquidity requirements change a lot. So it's also unknown unknowns again. In theory, it's interesting for the service providers who have liquidity anyways. They might not need at a certain point in time. They could use it, for example, in an ARC to gain some yield on top of that, in theory. But it's too early to say that it makes sense, because we don't even know yet what an ARC liquidity requirement might be. Mm-hmm. Maybe to add to why it's on Liquid today, what was the technical reason for that?
Just as clarification, we also have a Bitcoin version in the making. Of course, I think we are first in a Bitcoin Covenants conference, so I think it was important to show that there is actual production use case or real use case for Covenants. So that's why also the reason why we let's say focus a lot with the Covenants version. But also I will say. I think the interesting part of Liquid will also be right now. So the interesting part that I see is really trying to see what will be the maximum design space of Covenants that can help ARC. So instead of say, okay, maybe I need to gamble to what will be the next soft fork, and now start building a 1-year project on this soft fork that will never be merged. Let's just go where it's super flexible, and Liquid has introspection of code at the maximum level, so you can really do recursive Covenants. So let's try to really experiment there, even before go with a super detailed spec, and then you need to wait 3 years or 4 years for a soft fork. That being said, ARC doesn't require Covenants. You can do with pre-signed transaction, but my point is that it changes the requirement, and I think for light client, mobile client, you still, even though the interactivity is not that bad, even with the pre-signed version, you still need to store the tree, which basically grants you the unilateral exit, and I think can be a blocker for retail consumer level application. But that being said, I think the next months we will see both versions, and I think the market will decide what can be done, and
that's interesting. Okay, quickly, because the Austin sun is pretty hot, even though it's covered. Obviously, I mean, maybe to circle it back to the reason why we're here, Covenant conversations, script improvements, and all of that. There's been a lot of, I think, openness about maybe doing a lot more introspection than some people were comfortable with maybe a year or two ago. Just want to get you a general impression on what's your feel on all of this. Are you optimistic? And if you want to shill your favorite Covenant, go ahead.
I'm super bullish after these 2 days, because for the first time, all the people working with Covenants in production, or in general, they're really very knowledgeable about the topic. We're in the same room, and and this is very important, because it was important to have a nice medium to discuss these topics. And I think in general there is this consensus that we really need to do something the right way and not rush one software proposal or the other. builder. And yeah, I'm super interested with the Rusty proposal of the restoration
project. Yes.
And yeah, I think that's the right way, because we are really going out to say, hey, we are doing the right engineering steps. So we are demonstrating, like what are the boundaries and what are like potential food guns before we're going to merge.
And all the cost, right?
Yeah, all the costs and how it is impact. So I think, Bitcoin, you should not rush it things. You should really do things right. And I think in the end, like many proposals were like maybe limited on purpose, which I was okay and agree with them. But at the same time, the real people that were really interested in Covenant, they said why we need to for now something that maybe we need to change it right away. This is an opinion again, but I think I'm super positive. I think we are, the community knows that we need to increase the scope of Bitcoin in this way, and it will help Lightning, will help Arc, will help many other protocols. So yeah, I'm super positive.
Yeah, same here. Super optimistic about Covenant, and I love the direct introspection opcodes of Liquid, and I am optimistic that we'll get similar powerful opcodes on the main chain. And if I could pick one, it would be Opcat and also some kind of OptX hash. And even if it's not that, Rusty's model gives us actually something to talk about, a frame of reference for what these covenants mean on a computational from a computational perspective, and like you can actually, like as you said, restore Bitcoin script to its former glory in a safe and sensible manner.
It's a nice narrative, isn't it? I mean, it's the first time that someone puts it like this, but the Great Restoration Project kind of has like a nice ring to it.
Yeah, it has, and it makes a lot of sense because those opcodes were disabled because people were afraid of what they could do, and now we can actually evaluate, is it actually that bad? What's the worst that could happen? And how can we mitigate the worst case scenarios with reasonable resource limits? Like, it makes a lot of sense in every aspect.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, gentlemen. Thank you for your time, and we're going to call it here. Thank you.
Thank you.